Happy Mother's Day, homeschool mamas. Happy Monday. For many years, Monday, not so happy. Usually an emotional challenge to adjust to realistic expectations that not everybody wants to homeschool. And that included me. But welcome to the Homeschool Mama live series. Today I'm going to be introducing you to Melissa from Pocket Homeschool. And Melissa has a special love of poetry, so I won't put her on the spot, but she is most welcome to share her poems. And just know this, you have a special invitation, all you homeschool mamas, to join us in the Patreon Homeschool Mama support group. Next, in the next couple weeks, I'm going to offer a workshop where we can learn to incorporate a writing practice. Now that could look like different forms. Some of us like to write short fiction. Some of us like to write or dabble in just journaling or writing posts for blogs, all sorts of different things. So if you're interested in writing, creating a writing practice, getting into the flow of writing, join us. I'll give you the link. And let's have tea. Today, Melissa and I are going to talk all about how to create homeschool communities. Really important topic, especially after the last few years when our communities in general have, most of us, become rather disjointed. So let's talk about homeschool communities with Melissa. Hey, Melissa. Are you there? Hey,
Hello, Teresa.
nice
I'm so
to see you.
excited for this.
Yeah, welcome.
I just can't wait to get all talking about communities and about everything else that we're going to talk about today. I know we're going to have a really awesome conversation as we usually do. And I'm sorry, I didn't bring any of my poems with me today,
No
and I
problem.
don't have any memorized.
Okay,
But
well then bring
everyone
the
should,
workshop.
yes, everyone should join us for the workshop. Memorizing is not my strong suit, but that's okay because we all have our own unique gifts and talents as well.
So true. Like poetry.
Yes.
Poetry is not my strong suit. I enjoy it. I quote people all the time, and it's not my go-to. I've written 2 poems in my life and a ton of other kind of writing, but it's going to be so much fun. And you get to do your debut poetry presentation to the world. No pressure.
Yes. I mean, I have done readings before in my community and when I was in college, but this will be different, a different feel, a different audience. And so it's just always a special thing every time that I get to share my poetry because it's a really it's a lot to create something and then share that with other people. It's a very vulnerable place, and you have to trust that people are going to receive it well and trust that you can handle it when people don't receive it well, which those
Yes.
are two really hard skills, even for someone like me. I mean, I'm out here, I am like doing this Instagram live with you, so of course I put myself out there, but for my poetry it's a little different. It's so personal, and it comes from a really, really deep place in my heart. Not that the other stuff I do doesn't come from my heart,
Yeah.
but it's just it's just very different. It's something that like I've been writing poetry since I was a kid, and so it is something that has always been a part of my life, and I don't want to ever like lose my a joy that I find in it.
Yeah, it is beautiful. And it's my experience too, when you begin to write publicly. In the back of my head, when I first started, I thought everyone knows what I'm thinking. Oh my. And then I discovered no one's reading what I'm thinking, so it's fine. No, not nearly as many people are interested in what you're thinking as you think they are. And then as time goes by, you discover that actually the mere act of just putting stuff out there helps you to clarify what you really believe. And it also helps you to just own who you are, get a whole lot more comfortable with who you are. It brings you to a place of much more authenticity, certainly vulnerability, but definitely authenticity. And not coincidentally, our conversation today is all about building community. And I think that's a really important characteristic for us to show up in our communities authentically and vulnerably. But
Yes.
before we get started on a discussion on community, I would love it if you would introduce yourself to the community, this community, and also share what brought you to homeschooling.
All right. So I am Melissa Brander. I live in the Midwest on beautiful Lake Michigan. It doesn't always get enough love the way some of the coasts do, but I really love living here. It's beautiful. And I run Pocket Homeschool, and I focus on what I call smart homeschooling, which is simple to implement, meaningful family experiences, academically oriented, reasonably priced tools for explorative learning.
Love it.
And so that's really what I focus on, and the kind of core values that drive my business decisions and the things that I create and
Yeah,
share.
that's beautiful and very clever. Very clever.
I like acronyms. It's the writer in me. What can I say?
I was gonna say it's very clever. What have you learned about your kids this last year? You've got how many kids? How old are they? And tell me about what you've learned about your homeschool kids.
So my oldest just turned 11. He just recently had a birthday. And then I
Yeah,
also have a 8-year-old. And I realized you asked what brought us to homeschooling, and I didn't answer that.
all right.
But we started homeschooling because at the time when we were thinking about homeschooling, my husband worked a job where he had every Saturday mandatory Saturdays. And so he got Thursdays off during the week. And so part of the reason that we started homeschooling is just we realized that if the kids went to school, we would have no family time
Yeah.
together. Like my husband had to work every Saturday. He's in a different job now and he doesn't have that anymore. But at the time when we started, that was a big deal for us because we had got used to doing things on Thursdays when my husband didn't have to work. And we were like, if when they go to school, the time that we'll have together will be so small. And also my husband had been homeschooled part of his childhood, and so he had more familiarity with it than I did. And so just when we were sitting down to consider all our options, we kept coming back to it, and we decided to just try it, and we loved it and never stopped.
Kept trying.
Yes, kept trying. And what I've learned, I think, about my kids this year is I really just, every year, I feel like I get to watch them become more of who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that this year, what I really learned is I tried to just lean into how they need me to support them. And in doing so, I learned a lot about them,
Mhm.
about the kind of thoughts that they think inside their heads and everything like that. And it feels a little silly to say that because I feel like I learn that every year. But every year, if you're keeping your eyes open to it, there are new and surprising things to learn about your kids and about the other people around you.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. So that actually kind of ties in perhaps with the question, what have you been learning about yourself?
I think what I learned about myself this year is that I can do hard things
Yeah.
and I can come through hard things on the other side. There's a lot of changes for us in the last year. Or in November, my husband lost his job. He's at a new job now, thankfully. But that really, and my mom had a fall at the same time and needed semi-emergency surgery because she broke her kneecap in half.
Oh,
And so, like, all these things happening at once, it did feel really overwhelming. And, but so many people helped and supported us along the way. And it reminded me that I can do hard things and that there are people out there who like love us and support us, who are part of our communities.
yeah.
And it really just helped me to see that, like, the things that sometimes I think are just insurmountable, that feel insurmountable at the time, it's never the case. I have survived hard things in the past, and I can survive hard things in the future too, even if at the moment I'm unsure of myself.
Speak it. Truth. Yep. Human experience, true. We just have to agree to show up for the growth or agree to experience the growth and go with the growth because we're always being called to growth somehow, some way, and some seasons are more challenging. Yay, that's great. So
I'm gonna have to learn this lesson again, like
you
10
will.
times at least in my
Oh,
life, because every
hell.
time it seems like I forget, because it's really easy, your brain tells you like this hard thing. Yeah, like you survived those hard things in the past, but what if this is the one that does you in? So it's just a lesson that I have to continually keep learning, and I have to give myself grace and patience
Yeah.
when I feel stuck,
Mm.
um, to know that I will keep learning this lesson many times my life over.
Story of the human life. Absolutely. Everybody's going to have to keep relearning all the things. Yeah. There's lots to learn. So tell me, what has that clarified your values this year? One of my questions was, what is one to say three values that really infuse your homeschool life?
This is a really hard question to answer, to try and just like distill it down to just one to three things.
Yeah.
And I think like for me, when I think about our homeschool, what really like stands out to me is just like uh my passion and drive that we should all be lifelong learners. And so when I create that space for myself to be a lifelong learner, I'm able to create that space for my kids to be lifelong learners. And so I feel like that lifelong learning, that's probably one of my core guiding values in our homeschool, is that we are made to learn, and we are made to learn our whole lives. And it doesn't just stop at some arbitrary point because you are finished with school now, and that we are learning all the time. And whether we recognize that we're learning or not, whether the things that we're learning are good or not, because sometimes we are learning things that like do us a disservice, like when we pick up a bad habit and we learn to make that bad habit a part of our life, and it doesn't do us anything good. So we learn all the time. And so if we can approach life with the knowledge that there's so much to learn and that we are always learning, then I think that serves us well for the future. So I feel like that lifelong learning is one of my core guiding values in our homeschool.
Beautiful. I've learned that our values can shift over the course of time. They don't always stay the same. But when you speak about lifelong learning, and also this last year being a season of requiring you to grow in ways that you weren't expecting, that is so similar to me. That willing to learn lifelong, no matter what gets thrown at you. And it does seem like the things that you least expect to teach you are the things that actually happen. And we can't always anticipate the things that actually will happen. So really, if we could just like turn down the worry meter, because it's not going to work anyway. Something up or something will come up we weren't expecting. But I've learned that the values, they shift over the course of time. But what I always see as a value, why values to me are important, obviously there's so many reasons why they could be, but one of the really important things is that are our values aligning with what we're doing today? And for me, that helped me to acknowledge that if my goal is for freedom, then me bringing home a private school to make a 9 to 5 homeschool, private school in my home was not freedom. It was some form of self-induced torture at times, or at least self-induced challenge. And not just me, but all the kids didn't enjoy it either. So did that really serve freedom? So that's why I asked the question about values. So thank you for sharing that that's your value, is lifelong learning.
Yes. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share and to think about it, right? Like, I think sometimes we can start doing things and not even check in with ourselves if what we're doing is actually aligned to what our values are. We don't always approach life from a place of thinking about our values. And so it can be easy to start doing things that we realize later don't even actually align with what our values are.
Exactly my experience. And there's so many demands and so many kids and so many voices that you can just go to the next thing. You're always moving to the next thing. So at the end of the year, we can actually, review. imagine, how do we want to show up for next year? What do we want as our values in our homeschool? How do we want to do this homeschool thing and keep moving our values, aligning our values closer to our actual activities? Yeah, beautiful. So the topic of our day is a discussion on building homeschool community. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are on how you can create homeschool community.
I think so. I think homeschool community is, it's something that like you have to be intentional about creating. You have to think about, again, ask yourself what your values are, and you also have to like seek people out. Like sometimes in life, community just falls into your lap, but a lot of times community is something that has to be actively fostered and actively nurtured in order to make it happen. And I also think another thing that I used to think about community is that once you find your community, you'll never be in a place where you have to find a community again. But what life has shown me over the last several years is that communities change and shift over time. As you change, as other people change, then sometimes the communities you are in are not the best fit for you, and you might have to seek out a different community. And that's really hard and really intimidating. It might feel like this was what you thought you had it. You thought you had it, and then it might feel like you have to start over again, and that can feel really frustrating. But I think like if I've learned anything about community, it's leaving space for you to be yourself and for other people to be themselves.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, you can really create a community where you can grow and learn together. And yes, Whitney, I see your comment, outgrowing a community is bittersweet. It is so bittersweet, and it can be so hard and so painful. And sometimes you can try and hold on even after it's clear that you should let go. And that can be such a hard process as well to reckon with and to move through.
It really can be. And, I'm hearing from people, I don't know if I've introduced myself to everybody, but I'm Teresa and I'm a life coach, homeschool mom turned life coach. And so I hear regular conversations about all the fractures in the last few years, and everyone knows it. Like everybody's heard it because they're experiencing it. And whether that's our values aren't aligning, or like you're saying, outgrowing a community for various reasons, a lot of people have experienced that. And really how to align, a community that both serves your children and yourself. Sometimes those don't actually always go together. Sometimes I found community isn't even found in the homeschool community per se, that sometimes your real connection can be found with people that have nothing to do with homeschooling.
Yes, and I think sometimes too, another thing that I've observed is that like for me, it's important. There are friendships that I have made sometimes through the homeschool community, and later on, those families might not always homeschool all the way through.
Yeah.
And if they're a person that I really value, then I do try and think intentionally, how can I keep this person in my life? Because I think sometimes people change and people's circumstances change, and you have to leave room for that. And it can be really hard, especially if someone is going through a really major life event, and for them to feel like, they have this homeschool community and now maybe they're not homeschooling for whatever reason. And so for me, it's important to recognize that there can be community, not just within the homeschool community, but within the greater within the greater community at large, because those relationships can bring so much to your life. This is not, I'm thinking just now of one of my friends, and she is not a homeschool parent herself. Actually, she's quite older than me. She's what would be defined as the elderly lady, and she is a huge part of my community. And she brought over flowers for my son for his birthday and things like that. And I cherish our relationship so much, even though it is not a relationship that came to me through homeschooling or having anything to do with homeschooling. Having her as a part of our community is such a beautiful and valuable gift to me. And so I think don't make your community too small, by only looking for people who are exactly like you. But if
Hmm.
those people can leave space for you to be you and them to be them, then you can have such a beautiful community.
Amen, sister. I would love to hear what other people's thoughts are, where they're most likely to find community for those listening, if you would share in the comment section. I make assumptions because of my own experiences, but I know we all have different experiences. I think oftentimes homeschool moms are asked about the S question. I call it the S question, socialization. And I think random strangers are right that people should be concerned about homeschool socialization, but not for the kids. We should be concerned sometimes about the mom because mom is so busy. She doesn't have the energy at the end of the day always to incorporate real friendships. And sometimes we're waiting for our kids while they're doing extracurriculars, or we're driving people, or there's just so many demands that we just feel spent and don't feel like we're invested in other real people in a really deep way. So I think sometimes the random public is probably right. They just don't realize that it's the homeschool mom socialization, not the kids.
Yes, and going back to what I was saying earlier about when you leave a community or outgrow a community or whatever, it can be really hard. At least I found it hard for myself to rebuild that trust and vulnerability with new
Yeah,
people, especially if leaving the community was really hard. Emotionally, it can be really scary to feel like you're putting yourself out there again.
yeah,
And so you have to, it takes a lot of trust and bravery. And when you're vulnerable with the new people, that it can be totally, totally out of your comfort zone. At least it
yeah,
can be totally out of my comfort zone. But if you are always holding yourself back, it's really hard to bring a community that way. And sometimes, you just have to be brave enough to talk about the hard stuff that has happened to you. Something that I have really realized is that the only way sometimes for me to move forward in my life is to be honest about the hard things that have happened to me in the past, the ways that I've been hurt in community in the past, because if I cannot be honest about those things, I'm always holding back. I'm always being fearful. And I'm not saying you have to spill your deepest, darkest secrets,
yeah,
but for me, in order to be a part of community, I can't pretend that past hurts haven't happened to me, because then I'm not being authentic and vulnerable and true with the other people around me in my community.
yeah. It sounds like you've been reading Brené Brown's Braving the Wilderness.
I haven't read that one of hers, but I've read some of her other things.
Okay, so some of the things you said sounded like you'd memorized quotes, so you clearly are like-minded.
Yeah. No, I've read her The Gifts of Imperfection,
Gotcha.
and yeah, and some of her other books, but not Braving the Wilderness. So I guess we are just on the same wavelength there.
I, especially from Brene Brown, I learned this and various other sources. But, I speak a lot about building boundaries. I do coaching on building boundaries. But for me, I've learned building boundaries isn't just about saying no to something else or someone else. It's also about saying yes to you. And what I mean by that is it's not just about saying, I'm not this person, I don't engage like this, or I don't do these activities, or I don't have enough bandwidth to do something. It's also about who am I? What am I about? And am I fully being present here as myself with you? I've noticed there's a direct connection between creating boundaries and building your identity and getting clearer in who you are. And for me, that was a massively big earthquake, really season, probably years. But it started with a few weeks to months where it was giant for me, and it has been profoundly useful for me. But here's the thing. I had a friend who said to me, a very important person say to me, that I don't understand why people don't like me. I'm nice. And I heard that and understood that and certainly lived that for a long time, thought the same things. And yet I've learned sometimes people don't like nice people.
Yeah.
We just don't. And so the only thing you can do is own who you really are, be who you really are, and people will not like you, and then people will like you. and you will figure out who those people are. But the thing is, if you're being nice, but you're not being authentically you, and you know that someone likes you, you don't really know if they like the real you or if they just like the face or the mask of you. So you might as well just put yourself out there as, this is who I really am. If you don't like me, okay, the whole world does not like everybody. And on the other hand, if I'm really me, then you can actually decide, is this person for me or not? And then you also feel genuinely accepted. So that's why I think authenticity is so important.
Yes, it's funny because like an hour before this, before now, I was talking with one of my friends, and we were talking about how I said something to the extent like, I don't know how to tell you not to care what people think about you because I still care what people think about me. And
Yeah.
she was like, "You seem like you have it all together." And I'm like, "Thanks, but I really like it I just get in my own head sometimes."
Yeah.
And I think like especially like I have a lot of people pleasing tendencies,
Yeah.
and if you are watching this and you also have people pleasing tendencies, then you know how hard it is to be okay with people not liking you. And you really, it's it's hard because it makes us uncomfortable to be disliked, right? In an ideal world, everybody would like everybody. And like, I don't want to be doing things on purpose to make people dislike me. Like, I'm not going to be like mean or rude or anything on purpose to make people dislike me.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that people aren't going to dislike me. And to just sit with that uncomfortable feeling that people can dislike you and you can survive that, you
You
can
can.
live
Yeah.
through that. That's something that I have to remind myself of. I think I don't know, Teresa, if you ever are familiar with Elise Myers, but she's an influencer here on Instagram, and she talks sometimes about how like, if I'm too much, go find less. Like, you can go find less. You don't need to you don't I don't need to make myself smaller for you. You can go find less if I'm too much. And I think about that sometimes because I feel sometimes like I am too much and not enough all at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, but it's other people's choice. If I am not right for them, I don't necessarily need to change who I am
Yeah.
to be the person that they need me to be, because
You,
that person exists that person exists and they can find them, but I can only be the person that I am.
Melissa, you are just the right balance of lovely to me.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Teresa.
I like you. But the most important person I think that we have to actually get to, to peace with is actually ourselves, that we are in relationship with ourselves. And when that concept was first introduced to me, I thought it was really weird, actually. But now I understand that, yes, actually, how I'm speaking to myself, how I'm feeling, how I'm allowing myself to tell myself thoughts about myself, most important relationship. Because, and obviously it's obvious as to why that would be. I could be speaking unkind, shaming messages all the time to myself, but what happens for sure is that how I relate to myself is going to affect how I'm relating to everyone else, including my kids. So, and there's no question that that has been a challenge in my life, as it is, I know it is with everybody. It's what we do as humans. We project onto other people how we feel about ourselves. So it's a really important aspect to consider when we're building community, is doing our own internal work, addressing our real stuff. But, something that I want to add to is that um, sometimes we need to work towards accepting everyone. And I mean, it's kind of a common discussion in the last few years for obvious reasons. There's so much division, but I actually mean it. I really feel that we are capable to being kind to each other when we see the world very differently. We're not going to always, but we absolutely can do it. And it can be a super hard challenge sometimes, because what people are, putting out there looks to us as very not harmonious or not kind or not peaceful. But this space here is everyone is welcome space. It does not matter to me where people come from or how they think. Everyone is welcome. I wasn't always the person that thought that way. I'll be frank, that wasn't me. I had distinct ideas of what the world was and how it worked and how I thought you should show up. And I didn't say it because I was too nice to do that. But I was thinking it. And because I know that I had that space of being judgmental and assuming that I needed to do the right thing and other people should do the way I think that they should be doing life, then I know that it didn't work. And it really just made me lonelier. And also, it wasn't real. It wasn't a genuine expression of who I was supposed to be on the planet. And it causes a lot of division.
Yeah. I think something I've been talking about with my kids this year is about seeing the inherent worth in other people. It doesn't mean that they have to be your friend. It doesn't mean that you have to let them hurt you. It doesn't mean that you have to have no boundaries with them.
Yeah.
But when you can move through the world and see the inherent worth of other people,
yeah.
it doesn't mean that everybody is going to be your best friend, but
Yeah.
it can help you to come to a place where it changes how you interact with people when you
Yeah.
can see that they are worthy just because they exist, that they don't have to do anything. They don't have to do anything to prove how human they are, to prove, and it's it's hard to reckon with, and to see sometimes, to understand that someone is a person even when they're doing something that you disagree with, even when they have been really hurtful to you, even when you really would rather not, because sometimes we want to we want, sometimes when we're hurt, we want the people who hurt us, we feel this like sense of like justice, like they should get what they deserve. But that doesn't really help you. It just that anger eats away at you. And so learning how to move through the world, seeing the worth of other people, while also holding boundaries, while also saying that like we don't have to agree, because I know that sometimes in my head I would really like it if everyone just agreed with me. Like, I think that this would be like, it would make the world an ideal place, right? But actually it really wouldn't. But actually it really wouldn't, because our differences, they also make the world a pretty amazing place. Like, Teresa, you are so good at having that like calming presence that I appreciate so much. And I feel like my energy is like always up here, so I'm not always the most calm, but that's okay. We are not the same people, and so I can appreciate what's different about you, and I can appreciate what's different about myself. Uh, oh, Mina, yes, would love
Yeah.
it if my kids just agreed. I think I would love it too if my kids agreed. But they're their own people, so also teaching them how to respect their siblings as their own people who they love, and not just try and make them mini copies of each other. I think that's really important in homeschooling, because sometimes we can get stuck on like, this works for this kid, so it should also work for this kid, but they're different kids. They're different kids.
Yes, absolutely. One element that I've noticed too for myself in the beginning of my homeschool years, I came from a schooled environment. And even though we didn't do a lot in the school before I was expecting that we would have a homeschool place where everybody would just connect and we'd all think the same way and we'd all engage our kids similarly, and then we would live happily ever after as a community. And then I discovered, as homeschool families, we do this independent thing long enough and we become very independent, and we come into our own values for our own reasons, and we get so much more clear on that. So we just become even more ourselves as we're doing this homeschool journey. So therefore, we're all not the same. In fact, we might even be more consciously different. But it was an opportunity, instead of looking at and I'm not going to name specific scenarios because I don't want to single out certain scenarios, but say take someone from an entirely different religion or an entirely different homeschool philosophy, or they parent very differently than you, or they choose to eat goldfish and you don't, or they choose to eat organic and you don't, or you fill in the blank. Sometimes in the beginning, I thought, well, how am I going to commune with people that don't engage the same way? But I've learned you can. It can be done. It is sometimes an effort of you deciding that I will still show up authentically and still allow other people to show up authentically. If you're a human being, I can honor your human beingness. And that is all.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think like mutual respect goes a long way.
Yes.
Like if you respect someone else's differences, but they don't respect your differences in return, you're at a situation where you have a really big disconnect, where you're
Yeah.
not actually building community if
Right.
if it's only one-sided like that. And that can be really hard, because you can't sometimes I think you want to change and become a person that will make them respect you, but you are just like you're not creating them authentic if you are just becoming the person that you think they will respect, whether that is like suddenly like baking all your own bread because you think that if you bake your own bread that they will respect you, but it's not really about what you're doing. It's about how other people sometimes they're moving through life in their own way for their own reasons, and you cannot, even if you changed yourself to become a person that they could respect, you would always be living with that, like, with that fear and that angst of suddenly not becoming the person that they would respect. And so, it's when you are in true community, and it's a beautiful community. It's going both ways. You are coming to this place where you might not be the same, but you both have an understanding and respect for each other, and that's really what builds community, is the ability to put aside your desire for sameness to be with other people who maybe sometimes it's hard to be with. Maybe sometimes it makes you uncomfortable. But if they can also put aside their desire for sameness, then you can come to a place where you can build a beautiful community.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes it really is
Yes.
challenging. And those scenarios that aren't being said, but we all know there's certain scenarios that are really, really tricky, then I want to honor, acknowledge that. I'm not pretending to myself that some moments, some relationships actually are beyond stretching, that even sometimes they require us to shift and own ourselves and really say, no, I can't engage in this relationship the way that I've been. So sometimes that's required. But yeah, beautiful words. Now
Yes.
let's switch gears for just a moment and talk about, especially when people are transient and they have a lot of shifts, they have to move from place to place, or they have moved in the last couple of years, or they don't have family in the community, or they don't really know any of the homeschool community. What would you suggest?
I think so. I don't know if I have advice for the people who are moving, but I have advice for the people who are like, we have lived in the same place and been a part of the same homeschool co-op for like 7 years now. So like the people that we started with the homeschool co-op at, who were there at the same time as us, only like three of them are still the same, and the all us rest is different people who were not here then. And so I don't know if I have advice for the people who are new, but I have advice for the people who are staying. And I think like what I have tried to do is, like, especially, when somebody new comes into our homeschool co-op and they're unsure, I have tried to like reach out and say, like, do you want to get together? Even maybe our kids aren't the same age or whatever, but sometimes like having that one like friendly face and just like saying, this is not like, I'm not necessarily going to become best friends with all the people that I reach out to, but I think like reaching out and asking them to just give them like a one one-on-one connection, so they know someone else in the group, can be really valuable, because it is hard. And so sometimes when you're the new person, it can be hard to reach out. So if you have been around and a part of a community for a long time, then if you can be the one to reach out to the new people. And I have a friend who's especially good at this, who whenever we're at a co-op event together and she sees the new people, she is very good about going over and introducing herself to the new people. Whereas I'm a little bit better at doing it virtually. When I see people pop into our group, into our like Facebook group for our co-op, and I say, hey, I'm happy to get together, etc. But we all have different strengths, and just inviting people in, that is a great way to help your community flourish and help people feel joined and a part of the community. And so if you are a new person, you have to be willing to look, and then hopefully there will be some more established people who are willing to reach out to you at the same time. And just sometimes saying yes to showing up, even when you're nervous and even when you're scared. Maybe this community isn't the right community for you, but you won't know that unless you try. And it's okay if the community isn't the right community for you. I think sometimes we want the first community to be the best fit for us. And it's okay if it isn't the case, because we have to leave space to recognize that not all communities and not all situations are going to work for every person. And so if you can just take the pressure off yourself of having to find it right away, because it's not something that comes in an instant, it's something that's built over time, then you can really, really have a chance to build some community if you are willing to try new things and to be patient. And understand that it's going to take time. It's not something that happens overnight. And even then, things can shift and change. Like, there have been so many changes in the way that community has been in my life, in my adult life. And every time there's a change, I'm somehow surprised. Like, the last several changes didn't show me that there was going to be a change. And just leaving space for that to be different and to be changing, and to understand. I think sometimes, especially say if someone moves, it can be really easy to think, I said I didn't have advice for the new people, but now I'm thinking of things. Sometimes when you move, if you had a really strong community where you used to live, it can be really easy to want to have an exact replica of that in your new place. So just being open to the fact that it might not look exactly the same as it used to look, but it can still turn into something beautiful if you are willing to give it the chance.
Yes, I've been the mom who moved a lot, or I should say, before I was 20 years old, I moved 19 times. And after I was 20, clearly a couple years, I can't remember how many times. And I know it takes about 2 years to really feel like you're connecting into a community. Sometimes it takes months to figure out what's the right grocery store and what's the right post office. And go onto Facebook really quickly. Go onto Facebook, ask people where are the communities, or find your local Facebook thread and invite someone to join you at the park. That is an underrated concept of you starting a community and you kind of just hanging out with whoever in the beginning. Ask them to tell you where's the best place to go grocery shopping, or tell me about the whatever community events that are around that matter to you. Then ask them the details. It feels very disjointed in the beginning months to couple years, belonging to a community, or moving to a new community and feeling like you really don't belong. You can be in the same space every single week for many, many months, and no one notices you exist because they're accustomed to being in their routine. So sometimes you do really have to take the lead and go introduce yourself.
Yes. And I think something too to think about is that once you have a community, you still kind of need to maintain the community, right? You need to be intentional about it. maybe they're, depending on, our co-op is structured in a really unique way that like not a lot of other co-ops are structured. I mean, there are other groups structured like ours, but we're not, some co-ops it's always the same group of people getting together all the time, but our co-op is more loosely structured, so it'll be different people getting together at different times.
Yeah.
So sometimes there will be someone that you connect with that maybe you haven't seen in a while, and just like reaching out to them and seeing how they're doing and everything like that, because like community is something you can't just like make it, boom, now I have my community, it's made. It's something that you have to continually nurture and continually grow and continually feed energy into, because that is how you never stay connected if you just never put any effort into keeping it connected. So just when you start to recognize your community and you start to realize who the people are that are important to your community, to your family, to your kids, to you as a person, just taking that effort to reach out to those people, even if it's something as simple as like sending them a funny meme you saw that it made you think of them and you knew they would appreciate it. It's a way to let people know that you're still like thinking of them and in their minds, and so just it doesn't have to be big and elaborate. Something I like to do is whenever a person pops into my head and I haven't talked to them in a while, I just send them a text message and say, I'm thinking of you. I hope that everything is going well for you.
Yeah.
And if it leads to a better conversation, that's great. But if it's also just enough for them to remember that someone is thinking about them and someone is caring about them, that's enough, because the community is really something that you can never take you can never just like put it on a shelf and say, okay, I have it now. I have community now. It's something that you really have to water and grow and
Yeah.
nurture continually, because otherwise it's very easy to become disconnected and fall away from your community.
And
And
I
I think,
get
go
exhausted.
ahead.
Yeah, we get exhausted. We really need to recognize that we need time away from our kids. And an easy way to do that, although it isn't easy for an hour or two a week, but if you are sharing kids with someone else, what I mean by that is if you take somebody else's kids for an hour or two a week, and then the next week they take your kids for an hour or two. I did that a lot when I was a lot younger, and obviously my 15-year-old wouldn't be cool with that anymore. But it's a really useful tool, because then not only do you have a space where your kids can go, they feel comfortable and connected to someone else, but then if something happens where you have to take someone to a doctor's appointment or so many possibilities, then you have someone as an emergency resource. That it's a very common discussion when we are living in a transient world and not everybody's with their family.
Yes, my friend was telling me about an article that she was reading about how as people get older, when they don't have families, then if they have to go to a doctor's appointment, which is the kind of doctor's appointment that you can't drive yourself home
Yes.
from, then that's a really big problem for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I know that we are far from that stage in our lives, but
I
it can be a really big.
just clarify that actually happened to me last week. So I'm like,
Oh,
apparently I'm that many years.
sorry, Teresa, I didn't mean to call you old. But I think I was going to say in the homeschool community, it can be really hard. I know that I have struggled in the past with finding childcare to go to my own doctor's appointments and to my own, to take care of my own health. And because, like, really, it's not built when you have kids between a certain age who are really too old for daycare, or even when they are the daycare age, but you are home with them all the time. So you don't have like any backup childcare, it can be a really big challenge. And I know that I have been humbled and blessed by people sometimes from our homeschool co-op and who have been able to step in and watch my kids for that hour or two, because it can be a really big struggle. And that's sometimes something that we don't talk about when we're homeschooling. We think, oh, I'm going to be with my kids all the time. What if I don't have backup childcare, what's the big deal? But you don't think about how these things like
Something.
the eye doctor is only open during like the same hours that your spouse is at work. And so what are you gonna do with your kids during that time? It's a
Well,
legitimate problem.
I bring my kids to the optometrist. It's the pap
Oh
smears that
yeah,
are an issue.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. My kids, like now, I probably could bring them to the optometrist, but when they were little, could I trust them not to like touch all the things and get into trouble while I'm like sitting there with the doctor going, "This is one or two." Like, no. I did have to bring them once with me to the urgent care because I couldn't. I needed like urgent care. It's like it wasn't an emergency, but it also like wasn't something I could put off, and that it was not the most fun experience of my life. Let's just say that.
There was a time where I was called to jury duty, and I couldn't do it because I didn't have childcare. But I was like, will you bring my kids? Because they will sit really nicely. They will be quiet. This would be the coolest field trip ever. They said no, but it would have been fun.
Sometimes though, there is like sometimes I want to tell a story from when my kids were younger that this just made me think of, because sometimes because they're with us all the time, it creates opportunities for communities you might not think of. And so at my church, we have a prayer time every week, and when my kids were young, I really wanted to go, but I didn't have anyone to watch them. And so I talked to the leader, and she just said bring them. So I brought them, and sometimes they were loud. But then as they started getting older, she approached me, and she said to me, would your oldest, would he like to, if I gave you like a list of countries, would he like to every week like pick one out off the list and tell us a little bit about it, and then we can pray for the people who live in that country. And so that was it was like this little community that formed around my kids and supported them and wanted to encourage them, even though that's not at all what I was expecting. And then that came to be a part that he really looked forward to, and also that the people there really looked forward to. And it meant a lot that this person had thought of my kids and thought of finding a way to include them in what is normally seen as kind of like a grown-up activity. And so when you find communities where you and your kids can be included, that's something that's really special. And I think as homeschoolers, I don't ever want to take for granted all the people that have been willing to open up parts of their lives to us, our lives that may not look like everybody else's lives, but have given us opportunities to be a part of community in an unexpected way.
Yes. That is beautiful. I actually think that teenage homeschool kids are some of the most amazing babysitters. And when you have a bunch of kids together and you just say, want to have, a quiet coffee chat or something, asking a older homeschool kid to take care of the younger ones downstairs, it's just amazing. My third daughter was born, and we hired a homeschool high school kiddo this was before we homeschooled, actually, to look after our older two kids and do some housework for an entire summer. And of course, because she's younger, it cost a whole lot less. And she was amazing. So offering, maybe there's a babysitting service that your homeschool high school kids could offer to other homeschool families. But thinking about homeschool high school kids, they're really useful, really useful.
Yes. A few weeks ago, a friend in our co-op organized a soccer day, and she had all the teens and tweens doing all the instruction of the younger kids, and it was really awesome to see them coming together in that way. And it's really great for the teens and tweens to give them that like leadership experience. And they often, I find, especially the kids who have been homeschooled the longest, like when I was a kid, age was a very big thing, because I was in a regular school, and you didn't want to be seen as being not cool by hanging out with younger kids and stuff. But age is so much less of a thing for homeschool kids. Like they
Are you 49? Because I'm not sure we can together.
I know, right. When you're an adult, it really becomes a non-deal, but because of the way that schools are structured with ages being so
Segregated.
together and segregated, it's really not a thing where there's always a lot of opportunities for older kids to interact with younger kids. And I think that's one of the beautiful parts of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And when I think about just community too, homeschooling, like I've said, like I've mentioned, like there are special people in my community who are in way different life stages than me, who are much older than I am, and they also bring really wonderful things into our
Yeah.
community. And so, to recognize that as homeschoolers, we are in this place where where we have kids at all different ages, but we can also have just humans at all different ages too, and go beyond kids. And I think when I was telling you about this, I think when we were talking about like setting up this live chat, I think I said like it's so valuable to have like other trusted adults in your kids' lives too, that they can look to and learn from, and as mentors, and to just be able to, like, you teach them so much, but it's also really awesome to nurture their relationship with grandparents and with other family members and other people, that they're able to like just they see the world so differently sometimes when you are able to just help them to see that that age is just a number,
Yeah.
that all people have something to teach us, to something to, and it's a positive relationship on both sides. And so I think that like just especially, like you might feel like you are doing it alone, but there's so much opportunity for community.
Yes. Do you know one of the biggest communities that has really been nurtured over the last few years is online?
Yes.
And I jumped online. I jumped online months before the pandemic, but around the pandemic, everyone trying homeschooling, really homeschooling or not, everyone was at home, didn't know what to do, whether it was online learning they were doing at home or they were actually dabbling in homeschooling. And so that was when I began a community, and I've created this much bigger community, but online. But you're all welcome to come for coffee. Like I'd be happy for you too. If you want to find out where I live, then you might be, maybe not.
Might be a long of a journey for me. I mean, I know you're in BC, right? We have driven all the way to Alberta, and that might be my max driving limit.
Yes, and it's if you have to can, then I can tell you how to drive here. But it's you can access people around the world when you're online, and we do in our community all over the place, like Italy and Bermuda and all across the states, except for Texas. Nobody in Texas, but and all the way up into the north, and really all over the world. You can't do that anywhere else. So you're always welcome to join that community. And you and I are going to be doing a workshop, and I just want to reiterate, in my community, and it'll be about developing our writing skills. And you're going to be sharing your poetry.
Yes, I'm very excited.
I'll keep you posted on the date, but because I know I'll say it wrong, I'm pretty sure it's in 2 weeks on a Wednesday.
Yes, that sounds right to me. Sort of. I could be remembering it wrong. Also, but it's soon. It's still this month. So
Thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa. Such a pleasure to chat with you. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we close?
I don't know. I feel so grateful, Teresa, for you for having me on here today. I feel like we always have a really wonderful conversation, and I am really just grateful to have this conversation here today. And for everyone who joined us, I read all your comments, and they were really great. They're really great too. And I hope that, if you commented that you are still looking for your community and still trying to find it, I hope that you are able to find that community. And I would say don't get discouraged, because there are so many people in this world. There are so many people in this world that I have faith that you will find your community and find the people who really can appreciate who you are, and who can see you. And you know, it's a very vulnerable place to be seen by someone, and to know that that person knows the things that you don't like about yourself. That person knows them and still chooses to love you and care for you anyways. That's a very humbling and vulnerable, and also amazing place to be, to have that kind of friendship and that kind of a community. And it's my hope that you will all be able to find a community like that.
Beautifully said, Melissa. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us, and happy Mother's Day.
Yes. Happy Mother's Day,
We'll
everyone.
talk to you soon.
Hi.